Good morning there, beautiful people. Good morning. Happy Monday. Today is Monday, February 16th, 2021, and this is the Duron Morning Show. Welcome to episode 25, I believe. This is a quarter of the way to 100. I told you guys I was not going to stop grinding. I'm Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Not going to stop. So, hope everybody had a great weekend. I'd like to always welcome the live listeners, and to anyone that's watching this later on any social media platforms, welcome and thank you for your support. So for today's episode, I wanted to especially because it's Black History Month, and I felt like done enough Black History episodes. I've only done one, and we're halfway through the month. I wanted to do an episode really on history in general, not just Black history. That's all going to be a part of it, but just history in general, and just have an open conversation about it, because it really does. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard we look, and we have some great methods, we're never going to truly know the truth about history. And this is what I mean by that. Everyone knows the saying that there's always three truths to a story. There's or three sides to a story. There's side A, side B, and then the truth. So I feel like, especially we see this with Black history, right? Not even to, I guess it's not even political, really. I hate when people say like not to make it political, and it's not a political statement. It's kind of just a fact-based statement. When you hear people say that blacks, or not even all people of color, but blacks specifically, can't build wealth, right, in this country, and someone might say, "What do you mean you can't build wealth? There have been black millionaires, black billionaires, but." If they say you guys have opportunities, you go to college, there's homeowners, but if you look at history, and this is something that's not shared, it's just like you have to really do deep dives and find out yourself. If you look at history, black people have been oppressed for so long that we weren't able to even after there were laws that were passed that allowed us to vote, still couldn't vote. Even after they said, okay, you're allowed to own homes, there was still oppression where buying homes wasn't really an option. The down payments were too high, the rates were too high. Just to compare, if there was a $100,000 house in a white neighborhood, they might give them a small rate and say pay $1,000 down. If the same $100,000 house in a black neighborhood, they say got to pay $30,000 down and pay that rate plus 10. So it becomes unaffordable. And that's just one aspect, right? I think we underestimate where history ties into a lot, especially in black culture, but just culture in general. We're taught that, and I don't have any issues because I'm not well versed on the subject, but we get taught that George Washington never lied, and all these things, and something about cutting down some tree and all this. But if you look back in history, he wasn't the best guy. Same thing with Abraham Lincoln. It's like Lincoln never lies. He's the 16th president of the United States, and he abolished slavery and all these things. But if you look back, Lincoln wasn't the best guy either. Same thing with all these people, Thomas Jefferson, and you know what I mean? And I don't want to just crucify them because everyone has skeletons in their closet. I'm not the best guy ever. If you deep dive into like my life, you know what I mean? Same thing that we do with these historic figures. So there's that aspect as well. But even something on a grander scale, on a macro scale, just how we got here, there's no way to really know. Science says one thing. And then, like I've had this discussion on the morning show several times. Science could say, "Oh yeah, the Earth is revolving around the sun is revolving around the Earth, and all the planets are revolving around the Earth." But then you find out hundreds of years later, which wouldn't even be in our lifetimes, that The Earth is actually revolving around the sun. All the planets are revolving around the sun. So all these things that we believe are true and we teach them as truth end up sometimes being changed once we have better knowledge. And I think that we should always seek more knowledge and more information. But I just think that it's like I said, mind-boggling and baffling to know that we may really never ever truly know, unless in the next 100, maybe 1,000, maybe 10,000, whatever years, we have some form of like artificial intelligence or something that can show us what the past was like. We'll never really truly know history because there will always be someone's perspective to tell. If someone from if someone, and this is maybe a little drastic, but if someone from the German side of the Holocaust gave their perspective on like what history was like back then, they might tell it like from a Nazi's perspective, they might tell it from being inside the Capitol or being inside like Hitler's regime and under quote unquote understanding where he's coming from and seeing his side, and that's why it's easy to act out his plans and things like that. But then if you tell it from a Jewish person's side that's in a camp, you might hear the stories of horror and they don't understand why this is happening to them, and you know what I mean? Like it's always, history is always going to come from a perspective side. And maybe it's easier once we have both perspectives to see what the truth really was. But that's just with written and recorded history. It's easy to compare one of Hitler's books and then one of Anne Frank's books and go, okay, like this guy was crazy, and he really did think that massacring these people was the right thing to do. But then you look at Anne Frank's perspective and how she had to hide in the attic with her family and just all these accounts. You go, oh, okay, like this you can get a better grasp of what the real situation was. Now let's go back even further, where there wasn't much recorded history. If you go back to like the BC times and stuff, that where there's languages that we had to quote unquote learn today, or we think that we know them, and we do translations, and then we get told what they say. Like, oh yeah, we have 10 people in the whole world that can read this, and this is the translation of this tablet, and it most definitely says this thing. But we weren't around back then. We could be translating their entire language incorrectly. Could interpret the whole thing wrong. Where we're looking at it, it says like, oh, there were this is over exaggeration, but we might read something where it's like, oh, there were 10 chariots and two whatever, and they're talking about like eating food or something, you know what I mean? And I don't want to downplay these people's work. Obviously they've worked their whole lives to try to understand these things. Same thing with hieroglyphics and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's the only way we know this history is from someone else's perspective. We've seen this. 10 people might translate a hieroglyph this way, and then another 10 people might come out and go, no, it doesn't say that. You're translating it wrong. You're interpreting it wrong. It's really a metaphor. It's really a parable. It doesn't mean what you think it does. So how do we know? How can we find out? What is the real truth? And I wanted to have this episode, this conversation, because it's just mind blowing to me. And obviously I try to do my best to try to blow y'all minds too. So let's just look at something like I said, to give another example. If you look at something in the 1600s, because that, like I said, we have recorded history. They might tell you from their perspective, their perspective, like, oh, we came here to which they didn't even know there was no America, but we came to these islands, we came to this place, there were people here, we were stronger than them, bigger than them, so we took it over. To them it only made sense. We wanted the land, we were exploring. They didn't really understand much, so we took it over. And to them, they didn't know that they were bringing diseases or bringing anything over here to what is now the United States. They didn't call it that back then. To them, they're like, yo, they kind of accepted us in, and then they started dropping off and dying. And then as we explored more, it only made sense to keep taking more land and more things. So that's their perspective. They have like a manifest destiny, and it's our job to explore and take over. But then from the people's perspective that was already here, they're like, we were just chilling, and then from what they know, they don't really travel or anything. These aliens came, and just these people that these white men came over here and attacked us and took our land, took our things, raped our women. From their perspective, it's a horror story. From the colonizers' perspective, it's a heroic tale about leaving England and creating your own path and stepping on whoever's in front of you and kicking down those doors. And like I kind of touched on earlier, especially with Black history, there's so many things we just find out now or don't really realize. Like a big one that comes up now, and I know I'm talking too fast, my brain is going in like 10 different directions. One that comes up now a lot is they call it Black Wall Street. There was a Black Wall Street that a lot of people don't even know that, and blacks were starting to create their own wealth and create their own big businesses, and it got burned down. They bombed it, and those types of things aren't taught in American history books for us to just know and find out. We find that out later. And just to go on a tiny tangent, I'm starting to understand like the older Black people in our community now. Because when we're younger, like 10, 11, 12, 13, coming up, they tell us these stories and like, oh, you haven't heard about this person, or you don't know about this thing. And I'm like, well, I'm currently in school. You're not in school. Like, you don't know more than I do. And then when I got out of school, now I'm 23, trying to tell my cousins like, yo, you don't know about this thing, or you don't know this, and I'm that quote unquote old person doing the same thing to them. Where I might try to tell them like, oh, you never heard of which they probably have, but I'm like, you never heard of Ruby Bridges, or you've never heard of what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You never heard about Black Wall Street. You never heard about these things, and they're like, yo, I'm in school. I'm the smartest I'll ever be. Blah blah blah. You're just old, because I used to say the same things. So I think it's crazy that we don't learn these things in school, and obviously it's done on purpose. It's not something that's an accident. And I don't know if anyone has seen recently there's been a I don't remember exactly where that was, but this one school was allowing people to opt out of learning about Black history during Black History Month. Like, the parent was allowed to opt their child out. And obviously it went around and people were saying, well, are we allowed to opt out of white history? Which is obviously not. All of our history is white history. Like, all of American history is white history. So, and we just get taken out of it or put in it whenever it seems to fit or seems to matter. No, they definitely throw Madam C.J. Walker in our face. They like to say like, look, there was this person that she became a millionaire. If she could do it, so can you guys. They don't teach us about I just heard recently that there was before Rosa Parks, there was a different person that said like refused to give up their seat. And there was a whole bunch of discussion about whether like her story doesn't come out because of colorism. Like, she was a younger woman. She was like, she might have been a child. She might have been like 14 or something. I don't know the whole story, but she was a darker skinned person, and people were saying the story wouldn't have been the same, and there was a whole lot of debate in there. But once again, history, it's not you would think with the advent of the internet, and it's becoming that, but with the advent of the internet, you would think that we would just know more of these things. But I feel like every other day, if not at least every other week, I'm finding out something else that we just didn't know, or they just didn't tell us. They got quote unquote left out of the history books. Like, you have to get out of school or maybe go to college to find out about like the syphilis experiments, or the Tuskegee, and about the Tuskegee Airmen, and about just about all these horrific things that have happened in our communities that they leave out when you're learning it in 8th grade social studies. They only, like I said earlier, they only teach you that the presidents, that George Washington and Lincoln and all these people's birthdays that we celebrate, they only teach you that the quote unquote good things they did. George Washington went across the Delaware and ended the war, and yay, but they don't talk about how he had slaves, and how he was most likely raping these women and trying to have children with them. Same thing with Thomas Jefferson. Same thing with Lincoln. We say, yay, he freed the slaves, but, and I don't know the entire story about this, but they said he had to free the slaves because of, and he didn't free them. Like, he abolished slavery, but he didn't free the slaves. And they said he had to do it because of pressure of something, but he did not want to do it. There's been like letters that have come out recently where he was writing saying, this is not something I want to do, but I got to do it. So we pray, like, we're taught to praise him, like he's the one that did it. 1865 Emancipation Proclamation, Gettysburg Address, and this is something he did not want to do in the slightest. And a white historian or someone might tell you, yeah, he didn't want to do it, but he did it. We should clap. And we're just always taught to kind of accept what we're given. Like, why can't you guys just take it? We're trying to give you guys a win. And we don't really get taught, besides the same people over and over and over, about the Malcolm X's, Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks, Madam C.J. Walker, Jackie Robinson. We don't get taught about inventors, about Lonnie Walker. Lonnie Walker invented the Super Soaker. People all around the world are playing with this toy, and they don't even know it. He was an engineer for NASA, and he was like, I can come up with this toy to make some money, and he had to quit NASA because they were going to take his invention. So he had to quit there, and he invented the Super Soaker, and now there's kids everywhere playing with that have no idea that came from a black creator. There's even and this is a whole different conversation, but it definitely has to go with history. There's not evidence, I don't know how I want to word it, but there's conversations out there that say maybe Mozart was even black. Mozart and this is the other one. No, I think it's Mozart. Who's the deaf one? Not Mozart. Well, I think it's both of them. There have been people have come out and said that, and we don't know because we've only, like I said, we weren't there. And then let's say 10 people come out and say that Mozart was black or something, and we have this evidence to prove it. And then another 10 people come out and say, no, that's not true. We have this evidence to prove it. We as the general person just sitting out here, we just have to wait until we see what we're told. And that's what this whole conversation is about. We literally are not bystanders, but that's really the only best word I have for it. We kind of just have to accept what we're taught. And then what happens is, if we don't accept what we're taught and we try to go find out answers on our own, then we get labeled as crazy. Like I said, we don't really know where we came from, is where not just blacks, but I mean like everywhere. That's the one of the questions that keeps everybody awake up and like at night. Why are we here? Where do we come from? What's our history? If you believe some people believe we evolved from like monkeys thing, and then there's others that believe that we evolved from fungus. There's people like this is all in the science community. I'm not even going like far left yet. This is because we share DNA with so many animals. People are like, well, where do we come from? There's got to be somewhere. We share DNA with octopi. We share DNA with mycelium, which is mushrooms and all types of fungus. We share DNA with dolphins. We share DNA with a lot of different creatures. So they're like, well, no one really knows where did we come from. And to keep saying the same thing over, 10 people can come out with evidence and say, we came from octopi, here's the evidence. And then another 10 will come out and say, no, that's not true. We came from monkeys. Here's the evidence. I don't think I'm crazy by saying this. I think I read somewhere we share like a stupid amount of DNA, like a crazy amount of DNA with bananas. A crazy amount of DNA. So we just like I said, we're just here being bystanders, trying to find out. Okay, so which one of these people is right? And then, what the sad thing about it is, there will be some type of conference or some type of meeting, and there will be 100 people will go. The top of the top countries, like the Russias, the United States, the Germanys, the Canadas, they'll get together and say, okay, so which one do we say is right? Which one do we put in the books? Someone will go, do the monkey one. Like, that just seems to be right. They have thumbs, we have thumbs, like, seems right. And then that's what we get taught for hundreds, 200s, however many years. And then that's ingrained in us. And we're like, well, this is the truth. Anything else besides this, like, how could it be anything else? We're all learning this. This has to be the truth, right? But once again, to go back to that same, I will forever use this theory or this example. It'll never sit right with me. We were taught and not us, but the people before us, we were taught that that everything revolved around the earth. All the planets revolved around the earth. The sun revolved around the earth, and we were the center of the galaxy, of the universe. And then we were taught that for hundreds of years. And the thought experiment, if you want to call it that I always do, think about it like this. We were taught Galileo and the top scientists before him and stuff, this is what they learned and this is what they were taught, right? Just like how we have top scientists today. So they go out and they tell everyone this is the model and this is how it works. So the adults believe it, then they have children and they teach their children that, and the children believe it. This is what's taught in school, this is what's put in textbooks for hundreds of 200s of years, right? Just like how we have a society today, this is what they had back then. They get taught that, and then someone comes along and they say, I don't think this is the model. Like, I think you guys are blatantly wrong. And then that person gets called crazy for a long time, 50 years, 100 years, and then it comes out way, way, way later. This is actually the truth. And all those, since this has lasted longer than lifetimes, all those people that were alive believing, they call it the geocentric model is for the Earth, and the heliocentric models for the sun. So there were people alive during their lifetime. They were born, they were raised through school and taught the geocentric model, like this is what exists and this is what it is. And then they went through their whole life and died believing that the geocentric model was correct. They never got even the opportunity because it took too long, 200 years plus, to even find out. Everything you learned wasn't right. It was a lie. And it wasn't a lie on purpose. This is what we really thought the facts were saying. So if that's possible back then, why is that impossible right now? Oh, because we have satellites, because we have this, and that. Maybe we are correct about the heliocentric model, but who says we're right about the way gravity works, or the way the way our history is. Who says we're right about that? It's easier to prove something like, oh, the heliocentric model is correct because we've been to space and our satellites can take pictures now and we know the circumference of the Earth and the sun and all these things. So that's easy to prove, right? Because it's math and there's numbers. How do we prove that these people translating tablets from I don't even remember how to the Mesolithic area. I don't remember how to pronounce it. Mesopotamia, that's how it's pronounced. How do we know that the scientists that are translating these tablets or these old notes or these hieroglyphs really know what they're talking about? And they might know exactly what they're talking about. But I think it's healthy. I think it's very healthy to be skeptical about it because we've been wrong before. And there have been, like, Einstein has been wrong. Einstein is considered to be the smartest person probably to ever live. And he's been right a lot. He has been right probably 90% of the time, but even he's been wrong. He's come up with some things and people really, really believed it. And then it took for after him to like die, it took years after that for them to go, yeah, like this one he was wrong about. So the smartest person we've ever known to live has died thinking that he knew like what something was or how something worked, and even he was wrong. So I'm not saying like, oh, you got to be skeptical about everything and like all history is BS, and I'm not being that type of propaganda guy. They're shoving down our throat like incorrect information. They're trying to control us and things. That's not what this conversation's about. But it's just like this whole conversation really is a thought experiment. Just think about it. Like what you think is true or what you think is right. Even in your own like personal life. There's things that like I grew up on that I'm like, this is right, this is correct, and this is the way. And then like I grew up and I went to different areas and I'm like, wait. This isn't right. This isn't right at all. But there's still people back from where I came from that are learning these things, and now they're going to have the wrong information. And it's just a cycle. It's cyclistic. So, like I said, just think about everything. The only things to me, and maybe this is just a personal opinion or a personal belief, the only things to me that can be proven in a sense are the things that have numbers. And maybe that's just my bias because I'm very logistical and very like logical, very analytical. So to me, if it doesn't really have numbers, you can't prove it. And I don't, like I said, I don't ever want to disrespect somebody's work, but they would probably find me disrespectful, because if someone who studied hieroglyphs for 20 years came up to me and like tried to prove, well, this is why this says this, and I'd be like, but how do you know that? Like, were you an ancient Egyptian? Like, you think that the way that they wrote this letter says water, and it could literally say air or fried chicken. Like, you don't know. So, because there's no way to prove it. If you got 100 people, and because those languages are dead as well, there's no one that speaks them. It's different if I say I know Spanish, right? If I say I know Spanish, and no one can like prove me wrong. I know that's what this says. That language is still spoken. People can go, nah, bro. You're not. That's not what you're speaking. You're speaking something completely different. But these ancient like Sumerian tablets and things that come from Babylon and all these ancient cities, we're like, oh yeah, like all I got to do is look at it for a long time and I could figure it out. And maybe they have, and maybe they can. But I don't know. For me, I just doubt it. So I'm gonna try to do a little something different today. I'm gonna try to do the questions a little earlier at 8, like right now, and see if it sparks any different type of conversation. And if it doesn't, then I'll keep going. But I've gotten a lot of feedback, and people said they don't really get to as many questions because I do it kind of late. So I'm going to do it a little early today and see if we get any sparks of conversation. You guys can ask me anything as always. And don't be afraid to come to the stage either. All right. Like I said, I'll open the floor again later at the normal 8:15 time, but I just wanted to give people the opportunity to speak now if they wanted to, because like I said, I've gotten a lot of feedback where people are saying you should do it earlier. But just to keep diving in on that, because it's a huge thing for me. Welcome. Oh, Julian left. I was going to say welcome, Julian. Just because it like I said, it boggles my mind and baffles me. I've been on this craze about ancient history. Ancient history has been really making me like it's a huge head scratcher for me, because there's so many theories. One, there's so many theories. Like it's a whole lot of stuff, man. There's so many theories. That's one. I don't know how many numbers I'm going to list off, but one, there's so many theories, and two, scientists have been wrong before. Like that's what it is for me. It's really only two numbers. Which theory is right or wrong? And number three, if we do find out what's right or wrong, how do we know it's right or wrong, correct or incorrect is what I should say. Just to give you guys like a little tad thing on that, we can't decide who's right or wrong on different things, but we can. Correct and incorrect is based off facts. I can't tell you how emotionally how you feel if it's right or wrong, because I'm not you. But I can tell you if something you're saying is correct or incorrect based off factual information. So, sorry. Like I said with the history, even if we find, so let me put it like this, and I'll go into like some of the weird theories I've seen on YouTube. So there's been a lot of weird theories from the ancient Sumerian cultures. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of like Nibiru, or the Anunnaki, and all these different. Basically, there was a culture, the first ever real civilization. They invented the calendar we use today. They invented writing. Like it's the first ever, as far as we know, the furthest that we can go back. This is the first time we've ever seen writing. Was from this place called Sumeria, or Sumer, in Meso. I can never say the word Mesopotamia. I can't say it, but basically in Sumeria, which is kind of like modern day Iraq right now. So if you go back, they have these tablets that were found pretty recently, within like the last 200 years. And people have been trying to translate these tablets, and because this culture is older, a lot of the religions that we know today and a lot of the stories that we know today, they actually have talked about it before the Bible, before the Quran, before all these things. And it's actually believed that the stories from the Bible and the stories that we know today actually come from this culture. So that's just, and like I said, that's just one theory. And how do we know? Like how do we know that we're even interpreting these ancient people's language correctly? And maybe because we already have the translations of the Bible, the translation of the Quran, and we already have these pictures painted in our head. How do we know that we're not just translating this and trying to paint that picture? Say that they were also painting that same picture, you know? What I mean by that is, imagine if someone already told you I'm gonna ask you a question, or I'm gonna try to find that information, but before I even ask you those things, the answer is 6. The answer is this thing, and then now I'm gonna ask you a different question, and I want you to find out your own answer to this question. Even though I already found that the answer is 6, you find out your own answer. Well, now when you're looking, you have pretty much a closed mind, and you're like, well, I mean, it kind of lines up to the answer to be 6, so yeah, I guess you're right. Like, the answer is probably 6. rather than you attacking it from a standpoint where you don't know anything. If you didn't know anything and you went in, you might find out the answer that you found was like 4 or 5 or whatever. But because you've already been told the answer prior, now you're looking for the answer. You're like, it's probably 6. So I think I don't know. My mind is going everywhere with it, because we have these stories with Adam and Eve. We have these stories of the Epic of Gilgamesh. We have all of these tales, whether it be Moses, whether it be Noah, and we just don't know if they are based off factual events, if they're based off of parables, or if they're metaphorical. I watched this 2-hour like documentary yesterday on what I was just referring to, Nibiru and the ancient Sumerian cultures, and it was a lot, and there was a lot of stories about, and they basically the way the story went was kind of like the creation of our planetary systems and these gods, and the way that if you look at Roman culture and you look at Greek culture and you look at even Christianity, like I don't know, Christianity. I was going to say like Christian culture, but Christianity. If you look at all of them, the similarities between them are really staggering, and everyone believes, or not everyone, excuse me, but a big theory is believed that, like I said, all of those stories come from this one story. And let me give you an example. I'm the example king. If you look at Roman culture, they believe in Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury, all like the names of our planets. First and foremost, we get the name of the planets from Roman culture. But 2, it's, if you compare it with Greek culture, they're all the same. For example, Mars in Roman culture is the god of war, but in Greek culture it's Ares. But if you compare it, it's the same stories, mostly same everything, except 2 different names. Jupiter, biggest planet, that's like their god of everything. That's Zeus. In Roman culture, it's Jupiter. In Greek culture, it's Zeus. It's god of everything, same thing. Like he's he went and birthed all the other quote unquote planets, all the other gods, and there's similarities. And now if you look at Christianity, there's like one overruling god of them all, and then the smaller quote unquote planets or messengers are the angels. If you go read any Greek mythological story, and you'll hear that Athena came down and talked to this person, and she was the goddess of wisdom and gave them this knowledge of so and so, right? Then if you go to the Bible, an angel will come down and do the same thing, like an angelic creature, even though they're not considered a god like how the Greek and the Roman cultures did it. They're a messenger from God. Same thing, like Athena is the messenger of Zeus. And all of these stories just have so many similarities, and they line up. And even if you look at something like the Great Flood from Noah's Ark, there's this same flood is written all over like every single culture. So it was once believed like, oh, Noah's Ark was kind of like a tall tale, and it was an allegory for something. Maybe it was like someone wrote this to try to give us a lesson and say, hey, if you are wicked and you do these things, you'll have to be cast off from the earth, and all these different what is the word, cataclysmic like events will come and attack you guys, right? So at first it was believed, okay, Noah's Ark was an allegory. And then if you go to the Epic of Gilgamesh, same thing, Great Flood. If you go to Hindu culture, Great Flood. And go to Greek culture with Poseidon, Great Flood. Roman culture, like it's everywhere. So there's got to be a tie-in somewhere. There either was a Great Flood, or they're getting the same story from somewhere. and they're and it's told by cultures that didn't have any type of connection anywhere. If you could go to ancient Asia, they tell the same story that was told in ancient like South America and ancient like I said, ancient Sumer times, the first cultures. So we're either all connected in some crazy way, or there really was some flood that we don't have the proper history about. Like, oh, it happened on this year and this time and this thing. We only have stories. And there's another theory about that, which I think makes a lot of sense and makes the most sense, is imagine if there was some type of flood today and it didn't kill all of us. It killed like a lot of us, like 99%, 95% of us. But the people that survived that story, or let me put it like this. Let me back up. So we believe that there was no, not we believe, but we're taught. We're taught that we're the most, one, the most civilized, and two, the most advanced society that there's ever been. But let's go, like I said, let's go to this Noah's Ark Great Flood type of story, cataclysmic events. If there was a sort of society that was just as advanced, just as civilized as us, and yeah, let's use us. Let's just use us. If we had that type of event and everything got wiped out, all our computers, all our storage, backup, our libraries, all of these things, because there was a flood that took out the whole earth, and it took out most of the animals, mostly everything, 95% of everything we have, right? The people that did survive, the 5%, would write down and have children and tell their children that we once had a society where we had these flying things. And let's say now, because I guess we are a little, no, I won't put it like that. I'm trying to word it the way I see it in my head. We have words like that we write down and we say, okay, like today is Monday. Like those are words that we understand and write down. That's the same way that they wrote them down before, back then. They understood their language to mean those same things. So let's say that after this great cataclysmic flood in today's society, since we have so many languages, and the people that survived in the United States will most likely write it in English. There was once a society called the United States, and it was awesome, and all these things. Even though there's no pens now, everything gets wiped out. There's probably no pens. All we have is like rocks and grass, and there's nothing. So we most likely write it with our fingers or something. So it might be sloppy. And someone survives in China, so they write it in. One person writes it in Mandarin, a different person writes it in Cantonese. And you guys get where I'm going. There's all these different languages of the account of the same event. And there's no technology to back it up. There's nothing that gets wiped out. Or, I mean, everything gets wiped out, and there's nothing that's left. We all kind of go like, in the next 10,000 years, the people that look back will go, well, do we really think 10,000 years ago there was that many things? Like, we can't find any evidence of it. We don't see this, we don't see that. A big thing that gets talked about when you talk about these ancient cultures being advanced, someone said, there's this one skeptic that always goes, well, why can't we find their trash? Where are the water bottles? Where are the things that they made, and where are the things that they had? But if there really was this cataclysmic event, there really wouldn't be anything left. There really, like, look at what you saw. If you haven't ever seen, go look up like the 2006 tsunami that happened in Indonesia. And maybe this isn't the greatest example because there was a lot of things left in the street, but look at how it destroyed everything. And it took a long time for the water to recede. And it was high, but it wasn't as high as it would be if there was a great cataclysmic flood where the waters rose hundreds of or thousands of feet. Think about how long it would take for all that water to subside and then think about what we would have left to tell like a story with. There wouldn't be anything. Maybe like I said, all the different cultures that survived on different places on the planet would write down what they remembered. They would write down how there was once like a great world that we had that was interconnected, and we used to talk to each other through these handheld things. They would probably draw pictures, just like how the hieroglyphs did with the ancient Egyptians. And we would, like I said, in the next 10,000, 20,000 years, we would look back and go, and there's no way that they had those things. But we do. We have them right now. So, just to do a little wrap up, because I'm getting to the questions part of the morning show. Today on episode 25, we talked about not only Black history, but just history in general, and had a thought. What do they call it? A thought experiment or a thought-provoking conversation about how do we really know what history is? We only know it from the perspective that it's told. We gave the perspective of, if you look back and you go to the Jamestown settlers, they probably told a tale of being heroic and their manifest destiny of exploration, and how they traveled from one country to the next and they should be rewarded. But if you took that same story from the Native American side, they would be like, we were living here peacefully and these people came and caused terror. It would be a horror story. So history is only told from perspectives. We talked about that, and then we dove into ancient history. How can we prove that ancient history is even correct? A lot of these people they definitely, what's the word I want to use? They dedicate a lot of their lives to translating tablets and translating hieroglyphs and translating these things. And if that's the case, how come if there are 30 people that do it, why are there 30 different translations? What's the truth? What's the correct one? And then lastly and thirdly, we just talked about, honestly, what number 2 was. How do we know anything? I guess thirdly, we talked about the only things that can be truly proven, to me anyway, are things that are fact-based and number-based. But we got 12 minutes for questions. I'll open up the floor to anybody that has anything to say. Feel free to come to the stage and ask me anything. It could be about ancient history, Black history, or anything that's on your mind. All right, we got 2 people that want to come. So, Dwayne was first. I'll let you talk first, and then you can go next, Preston.
Okay.
Did I accept your thing, Dwayne?
Yeah, where was the Black Wall Street at?
I believe that was. There's 2 things. I normally don't like to Google during the show, but I have to because I was thinking the same thing. I think I'm confusing 2 different things. Let me look it up. I think it was in Tulsa, but I don't want to confuse 2 different things. Yeah, it was. It was in Tulsa. Okay, cool. Black Wall Street was in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they bombed it. We were, like I said, we were gaining wealth, and there's pictures of it. I wish I could show you guys. There's pictures of the bombing. If you want to go and Google it yourself, just look up Black Wall Street, and Hannibal B. Johnson wrote a book about it in 1998, and there's also pictures here.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Preston. I was about to bring you up now.
Kind of talk about how, how what you were mentioning before, history has been heavily colonized, and just like you said, a lot of the really egregious and atrocious stuff that white people have committed Like it was told to us as kids, even as black children. It was told to us as kids in school in such an innocuous way, where like you're reading it like, oh, you know, like black people used to be slaves, now we're not. Like, but for some reason, it's like it's glossed over and it's told to you in a way that doesn't even like make you angry because they don't go into detail about it whatsoever. It's just like this is what it was. Like they use very, you know, neutral and I want to say like unpolarizing terms to make everything kind of just seem normal. And that I think that's like the big problem with the way they told history is that like it really enables like the victim to be kind of washed out and for the I guess the vanquisher to kind of be seen as the hero. Like, yeah, we came in and we took over this country. Like, no, you came in and you raped and you pillaged and enslaved people, and that's how things are the way they are now. But you know, I think it just goes back to like how like you know one man's God is another man's devil. So history will always be corrupt, always, because history can only be told by the victor. I think that might be changing now as we have the internet, and especially with the advent of like blockchain technology, which you know kind of makes censorship impossible on the internet. I think it's a way for you know important moments in history to really be preserved for humanity, but at the same time, it's just you know like. Yeah, it's just a shame that like history is kind of corrupted and adulterated the way it is around the world, and especially in
You're
America.
100% right, and I'm glad you said the quote that I was going to say. That's a famous quote. They say history is always told by the victor, and that's true. Because what happens is if side A goes and beats up like side B and takes over their whole country. It takes a lot for normally like side A will like you said go and pillage and burn down their books and burn down their libraries and burn down everything. So then there is no one or anything to say, hey, these people came and they like did these things to us. You only hear from, well, we were the heroes and we had to do it. They like you said, they kind of write it in a way where they act like they didn't have a choice. And just to jump in on what you said about censorship, I should have talked about that more extensively because we all know, and if you don't know, I guess you're about to learn, in China, they censor their history a lot. There was the Tiananmen Square event that happened, I believe that was in either, I don't know, I'm getting two dates in my head, either 89 or 95, but 95 was the first one that popped up. Basically, with that event, the people of China were trying to get out of like their dictatorship, and they wanted to push going towards more of a democracy. And there were people in this town square, the Tiananmen Square, and the government like gunned them down, killed them. And that is like very much censored and wiped out from Chinese history. Like you can't even like how we can just Google whatever. I just Googled Black Wall Street. Imagine if I tried to Google that and nothing came up because America has censored that. That's how it is in China. If they were to try to Google nothing happens. Nothing comes up. A lot of their stuff is censored. So for a lot of people that grew up or are growing up, like a 14-year-old child might not even know that the Tiananmen Square event even happened. And their parent might tell them about it. And they look at them like, no, that's crazy. I can't even find any information about that. That never happened. And that's what I'm trying to tell. Like, that's what this whole conversation is about. History, like, it's crazy that history is done like that. Because...
You think...
Go ahead, Preston. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think, just like outside we're aware of the egregious censoring in China, I think that they're also aware of it too. And it's not like it prevents the access of information, but it's not that hard for them to find those things if they really want to. But like you said, I guess for the general public, for the most part, the majority of people will be able to find the information that they want. I think that is kind of like and this is something that I was actually talking about in the room yesterday. It was about Black and Asian solidarity. What someone brought up is how, you know, like with the advent of like, you know, colorism kind of being like a globalized thing, where now you're kind of seeing, you know, like mainland China kind of rise up as a supremacist superpower and starting to, you know, kind of commit these acts of genocide on these different ethnic groups within Asia. So like it's even something that, like, you know, we're seeing going on now where it's like, you know, these communities are being wiped out, and, you know, their history is going to unfortunately be rewritten, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Like that this is its own conversation in itself, but like I keep trying to tell everyone, we always act like the things that happened in the past can't happen now. If you look back on the genocide that for the Holocaust, people go like, "Oh, there's not like how did no one do anything? How did we not like how did they not stop it? Like why didn't anyone step in? Like oh my gosh!" But that's happening right now. It happened kind of not that it was a genocide here, but everything that was happening with the children being like kept away from their parents in those cages with in America, like from letting them go back to Mexico, right? We couldn't quote unquote do anything. We knew it was happening and couldn't do anything about it until we got a new president. Same thing with what's happening in China right now. Everyone understands that there's maybe not everyone, but it's understood by a lot of people that a genocide is going on in China right now, and like we know it's happening, but we can't, like you and I rather, we can't do anything about it, and that sucks because we'll look back and we'll honestly, or rather, how do I want to word this? Our children will look back on the same way that we do at the Hitlers of the world. That's how they're going to look back and be like, "Yo, why didn't anyone just do anything?" Like, and then they'll say, "Well, we say there's no way that this could happen in our society today because we're too connected and we're this and we're that." But it's happening right now in 2021. And I guess I'll end it there. Like that's a powerful place to end it. I appreciate everyone that came to the stage. I appreciate all of you guys, like I said, my live listeners, and the ones that are watching this later on all the different social media platforms. You can follow me anywhere at the Duron Coles, and I will see you guys here tomorrow. I appreciate all of you. Peace.